Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp. Today we're going to revamp one of our lists that we have on our channel, and this is some of the best beat 'em up games available on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, there are some absolutely cracking games in this genre, and we're going to find out which are the 10 best.
Exactly that. When we go through them, if there are games that are similar to the game that we are talking about, I'll mention it at that point as opposed to its own separate entry, just for the sake of variety, and there'll be some honourable mentions at the end as well. So which games have we picked? Well, let's find out. Let's start with an absolute banger then, and this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. This is published by .emu, not developed by them, it was by Tribute Games, but it's not the last that you'll hear of .emu. They will appear again later on the list. And this is a real love letter to the Turtles show. You know, the cartoon from back in the 80s, it really does the show justice. And on top of that, it's just a great beat 'em up. Really a lot of fun to play, obviously has co-op as well. And it's quite substantial in its length compared to what this genre used to be.
Yeah, 6-player simultaneous co-op is always a nice little touch. And a lot of these beat 'em ups, I will say, are very reasonably priced compared to other genres.
Yeah, as well as the local, it has online co-op as well. And it's one of there's almost two types of beat 'em ups for me. You have the more methodical ones, and you have ones where you're constantly on crowd control because the game throws so many enemies at you. This is definitely the latter in that respect, which is not my favourite type, but this is one of my favourite beat 'em ups, which is a testament to just how good it is. Fantastic game. There's also the Cowabunga collection available, good enough to have its own spot, but it's another Turtles game. This brings together a number of different Turtles games, not all of which are beat 'em ups, but it does include the original arcade game, Turtles in Time from the arcade, and Turtles in Time from the Super Nintendo, as well as the Hyperstone Heist, which is on the Mega Drive and is based on Turtles in Time. And it has two NES beat 'em up Turtles games as well, so plenty of bang for your buck, as they say.
Next up, you've got Streets of Rage 4. Now, this is another one that was brought across from the same team.
This is developed by .emu, exactly right, yeah, and they've done a cracking job. Obviously, Streets of Rage started back on the Mega Drive, wasn't an arcade game. Some people might forget that because it was in competition with Final Fight at the time, which was, of course. And it had been a while. You had the first three. Most people consider the second one the best of those first three. The third one disappointed some people, but then there was this long wait and people wanted a fourth, you know. And there were a lot of projects to try and get it off the ground. Nothing came of any of them. And ultimately we got this, and this is great. You know, this is the former of the two types I just mentioned. This is quite slow paced in terms of how many enemies are on screen at any one time. But because of that, you've got a real weight of impact with your punches and your attacks, as opposed to the other ones where, as I say, you're kind of flitting about between enemies. And I love that kind of ferocity that you can feel as you're fighting. I love the art style, it's got that hand-drawn style. It's got a soundtrack that I think rivals its predecessors. Yuzo Koshiro, who did the music for the other games, was involved. He wasn't the primary composer. I think he did like one theme for it. But it was nice to see him back at least. And I do think just generally the game is fantastic and worthy of the name Streets of Rage.
I've just read that it's called Bare Knuckle in Japan.
It is, yep, that's absolutely right, always has been. And there's also an expansion for it, I think it's called Mr. X Nightmare. Yeah, so there's that as well, if you want more Streets of Rage. Next then we have the Takeover. Now this is, as with a few games on this list, inspired by kind of Final Fight or Streets of Rage or both. You know, they're clearly the games that most developers look up to when creating their own beat 'em up, but that's not to take anything away from this game because in terms of its gameplay, it's great. Really very solid beat 'em up. Does things slightly different at times. It has a few levels where it mixes things up. You have like almost like bonus stages, you know, where you're in charge of a vehicle or something like that, just to break things up a tad. Again, you can feel the weight of those punches. I enjoyed this one. I bought this on sale for like £2.
Yeah.
And couldn't believe the quality of game I was getting for that price. Even at full price, it's worth it, you know. As I say, it does borrow from the other games, but I wouldn't call it derivative. I think it does enough of its own to, you know, stand alongside them, really.
I don't know if you said this, but is this more Final Fight than Streets of Rage?
I would say so, yeah, but I definitely feel it takes from both, you know.
That one has 1 or 2 player local, but it doesn't have any online.
And with that in mind, we've got Fight and Rage, which I would class as quite similar in terms of taking from those classics. This one probably takes more from Streets of Rage this time round. You've got 3 playable characters. One of them's a Minotaur, which is quite interesting. You don't see that very often. And again, it's just a very solid beat 'em up. It does what I like about this one. Generally in beat 'em ups, you have a special move that you can use either when your special bar fills, or you can use it at the expense of some health. And this does both.
Okay.
I quite like that. You know, it's a little tweak, but it means that if you're in a pinch and your bar's not full up, you can use it at the expense of health, or if you feel confident, you can just fill that bar up. And I like having the choice of both, you know. I think that was a nice little addition there.
Definitely, yeah. This one has 3-player co-op, so not 4, not 2. This has 3, and there are also different endings that you can achieve with different decisions made throughout the game.
Then we have Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which was just about to release on the Switch the last time I did a beat 'em up video, just to age that video. Now this first came out on Xbox Live Arcade, and is obviously based on the comic series, I would say, first and foremost, but obviously then there was a film as well, wasn't there, based on those comics. And this is one of those crowd control beat 'em ups where you are flitting about. Has almost I don't want to say, I'm hesitant to say RPG, but you know, you can go into shops and you can buy meals and things that will boost your stats, very much like River City Ransom, or Street Gangs as it was called over here, that came out on the NES, and I do love that in beat 'em ups. I think it adds a nice bit of variety and just elevates the gameplay past just being an arcade game. You know, lovely pixel art style, very difficult game. I actually struggle with this one more than a lot of the others on the list. I don't know why. Has a host of different characters you can choose from. Obviously co-op is included. This is one of the best, I would say, on this list for sure.
Yeah, that one's got 1 to 4 player local and 2 to 4 online.
The next one then is the Capcom beat 'em up bundle. This includes 7 classic Capcom beat 'em ups, the most famous of which will be Final Fight, that we've mentioned a couple of times already, and it's nice to have this in its arcade form on the Switch. But there are some others on here that people may recognise, things like Captain Commando. Knights of the Round is probably my favourite actually on here, or at least on par with Final Fight. And then you have things like Battle Circuit, which I don't think released worldwide when it first came out, so this for some people will be the first time they've had a chance to play this. This is again just a very good collection, some classic beat 'em ups. You know, they might not have the bells and whistles that you expect these days, but if you've got any nostalgia for them, or if you just want to see kind of where the genre came from, don't get me wrong, there were games before Final Fight, but it was a very influential game in the genre and shaping it into what it is today. Well worth getting for the games that are on here. We then have the Sega Mega Drive Classics Collection, or Genesis Collection, depending on your region. Now the reason I've included this, it has the first 3 Streets of Rage games on for a start. It also has Golden Axe, which is another very good beat 'em up. Not sure if it has its sequels on there, I can't remember off the top of my head, I must say. And talking of beat 'em ups, it also has Altered Beast, which I'll be honest, I don't think is a particularly good game myself, but I didn't play it till later in life. If you've got nostalgia for it, it's nice to have it on here. And obviously there are a host of other games on here that aren't beat 'em ups. It's a very good collection, so worth a mention for sure. The next one is Double Dragon Gaiden. Now, there were quite a few Double Dragon games, and I wasn't quite sure which one to pick, and this is the most recent release on the Switch. We played this one together, do you remember? It's got that roguelike element to it, where at the end of your run you'll die, but you can obviously put points into stats and upgrades and what have you as you go along.
Yeah, this is good actually. I was really quite impressed with this. I think we made our way to the last boss on our first run.
We did.
But it is nice being able to add those permanent roguelike-like upgrades in each run to kind of boost you, and then in the next run it gives it a bit of freshness when you try something different.
It does, definitely. I was very pleasantly surprised with this one. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, because this is a series that has kind of fluctuated in terms of quality over the years.
Yeah.
But I liked this one a lot. If you're looking for something else Double Dragon-wise, you've got Double Dragon Neon is on the Switch, which is also very good. To be honest, I mean, you can buy the original arcade game. There's a Double Dragon collection available. There's Double Dragon 4. There's a lot. You know, you're spoiled for choice when it comes to this series on the Switch.
Next up, we've got River City Girls, which also has its sequel on the Switch, but I think we prefer the first game, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, they're both good games in terms of being beat 'em ups. The reason I've specifically picked the first one is I felt the second one included a bit too much backtracking. Right. So both games include like a map system where you'll be going across the town, and I enjoyed this because again you can go into shops and buy items that will boost you and make you stronger, but the second one took this to a new level. The map wasn't particularly detailed. I just felt it harmed the experience a little bit for me. But either game, you know, you can't go wrong really. And again, aside from these, you have the Kunio-kun series, which is where these games kind of originated or stem from, and you can get a lot of those games on the Switch as well. There's a collection of those too. Great games. I mentioned River City Ransom or Street Gangs earlier. They are westernized versions of Kunio-kun. Back to River City Girls though, this one's got a lot of humour, a lot of charm, lovely pixel art style. Quite a lengthy game compared to other games in this genre. Quite difficult, again, certainly provides a challenge, and has co-op, which you always want in beat 'em ups.
Definitely, yeah. I think there are 6 different city areas that you go through. But interestingly, we were saying before about some RPG elements. This actually has like side quests and things.
It does indeed, yeah. Yeah, very good game. Sequel's good too, but I do prefer the first one. Finally then, before our honourable mentions, we've got Castle Crashers Remastered. Now, talking of co-op experiences, I would say this is one of those beat-em-ups that is or was designed with co-op in mind. You know, sometimes it's a beat-em-up is a single-player game, but bring a mate along for the ride. This one I feel is better in co-op. Because of the way that the enemies attack. There's a lot of ranged enemies that will attack you with like bow and arrow, say, and you want people about that can eliminate that threat quicker.
Definitely, yeah. It certainly plays better together. Was this one brought across from Xbox or Microsoft?
This was on Xbox Live Arcade again, yeah, and obviously this is a remastered version. Really good game, quite quirky, has that like hand-drawn style with the little knights, all of which are a different colour. Yeah, but just quite different, I would say, to the other games in this list. If you're looking for something specifically for multiplayer, I would say this is definitely right up there.
Yeah, it also features an arena battle mode as well. So if you just want to play with 4 mates, or 3 mates, I should say, then you can just battle against each other locally or online.
We'll move on to some honourable mentions now, and the first one nearly made the actual list, I must say. This is Final Vendetta. Now this released, it was a couple of years ago, I seem to remember, on the Switch, and again very heavily influenced by, I would say, Final Fight this time, more so than Streets of Rage. Its biggest flaw when it released was that it only gave you one continue. Or, sorry, it didn't give you any continues. You had your one set of lives and then you got game over. Which for a game that was inspired by an arcade game and is selling for £20 odd is just a silly choice. You know, like there will be people that want to play this and try to complete it on 1 credit, and that's fair enough, but don't make that the only way people can play your game. Do you know what I mean? Since then, they have patched this game and they've included a casual mode. It's called casual mode, which I think is a bit cheeky, to be honest, where you can get your continues. There's also a level select, which I think only comes into effect once you've beaten a level. I think so. I've got to the end before I checked that, so I don't know.
Yeah, they shouldn't make difficulty names feel like a punishment, should they?
It feels like a bit of a 2 fingers up for people that complained.
Casuals.
Yeah, you bloody casuals. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about one continue, you know, like one go through, and it is a tough game at times. I do think it's quite balanced, I'll give it its due. And the music is from Utah Saints, who were a dance group from the 90s. Did things like Something Good, and what was the other one called? What have you done for me, or what would you do for me? Something like that. Anyway, good. I enjoyed them back in the day, and it was nice to have a dance soundtrack, kind of just paying homage to Yuzo Koshiro and Streets of Rage. A decent game, yeah, in this form now. Another honourable mention is Mother Russia Bleeds, which is one that quite a few people would probably have had on their list. I haven't played enough of it to do that. This is a more mature, in terms of its content, game. There's, you know, a lot of vulgarity. If you're happy with that, that's great. If you're not so much, then just be aware of it. But yeah, again, a decent game, and one that does go on sale relatively often, I feel. You've got Ninja Saviors, which is a remaster, I believe, of Ninja Warriors, which was an arcade game. I think this is based more on the Super Nintendo version of that series, and this is one where you don't move up and down on a 3D plane. It's all on one plane where you'll just move across left or right, which is kind of where the genre started, to be fair, and it does change the way you play, because you can't dodge, you can't move out of the way. Right. You have to be quite good in planning your moves out to not get absolutely annihilated, so I do like it for that reason. Mayhem Brawler is another one that's come out a few years ago now, had like a comic book style, looked lovely, to be fair. Was a good game, I reviewed that one, I'm sure we can put a card somewhere. My biggest issue with this was the balancing, which at times was pretty wild, to be honest. I remember there's a level where every enemy can poison you, and it was horrendous. Like, of any beat 'em up I've ever played, that was the worst level I've ever tried there. But on the whole, you know, now I've got over that, it's a decent game. And just a few more, I'll bundle these together. So you've got Arcade Archives releases via a company called Hamster on the Switch that sell for about £6, $7, $8 euros. And I've just picked a few out, cherry picked a few of my favourites. You've got Sengoku, and you do have its sequels 2 and 3 also on the Switch. You've got Mutation Nation, which is a good game, and I like the change up in aesthetic. You know, it has that kind of obviously mutant monster feel to it, and I like that. And the final one is Renegade, which is one of the games that really shaped the genre. I mean, you had Kung Fu Master, I think was probably the first game that was called a beat 'em up, but this one introduced things like that different plane moving up and down. It's called Belt Action, I think, where you kind of scroll along. And actually the beat 'em up bundle, the Capcom one in Japan, is called the Belt Action Collection. But yeah, I would say they're good games to pick up too.
Lovely. Let us know in the comments your beat 'em ups, if there's any here that you don't think we've mentioned that we should have done. And yeah, as always, thanks so much for watching.
Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick any of these games up, you can get your eShop cards over at our website, switchup.gg, and doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back in cash back. And there's other links down there too to PlayAsia and what have you, with discount codes if you want to use them, and it does help the channel out, so it's much appreciated. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.